Friends, the Charlie Kirk Show team here. America's debt bomb has blown past $37 trillion, and it's climbing every second. President Trump is fighting for fair trade and strong borders to slow the train wreck, but the numbers don't lie. When debt grows this fast, it can threaten your savings and your family's future. That's why more Americans are turning to real assets like gold and silver. I work with and recommend Preserve Gold. They make it simple to own physical gold and silver, even inside your retirement accounts like an IRA or 401k. Text USA to 50505 for their free wealth protection guide. With a qualified purchase, you could get up to $20,000 in free gold or silver. Breaking, new account linked to Thomas Matthew Crooks shows a furry fetish and transgender ideology interest, at least, referred to himself as they, them. And obviously, Thomas Matthew Crooks is the attempted assassin of President Trump in Butler, Pennsylvania.
Who had we were told, no digital trail whatsoever. He's the only person under 30 in the entirety of America who had nothing about him online.
But now we're finding out that there is more to it. Now, this corresponds certainly with some of the reporting that Tucker Carlson has recently done, although this they, them, and furry fetish is new. And I think why this is so eye-raising is simply because of what happened to Charlie. The alleged assassin of the monster who killed Charlie also had a furry fetish and allegedly and had a boyfriend that was trans. There certainly seems to be some of the similar ideologies that are circulating between the two instances.
Yeah, well, let's lay it out here. So last week, Tucker released a video which just dived into the Thomas Crooks case. As you guys probably remember, the FBI began looking into it and essentially said, there's no manifesto, we don't have an obvious motive for what this was, and he seems to have very little online trail. And they kind of left it there. There's been repeated efforts by Congress to get more information. It hasn't really led to many places. And so what Tucker was able to do is they kind of did standard forensic work. It wasn't a leak. They got a private investigator, and he used tools that they had. They knew one of his email addresses, and then they found accounts linked to that email address. And then they were able to use Internet Archive pages and a few other things. And they found some traces of his online presence. Certainly not all of it.
They found traces in 19 different profiles.
The main thing they had, though, was...
So that, but I mean, I'm not saying that they were extensive footprints in any of these.
Yeah.
But to find 19...
But the main thing they just had was just YouTube comments, which is a pretty low tier of internet engagement. So he had the internet comments, which showed he was making threats. They signaled that when he was pretty young, this ends in 2020 when he's 16 years old, and some of it's earlier than that. But he was saying pretty violent rhetoric, threatening rhetoric, actually against immigrants and stuff. So the FBI had framed it, he might have kind of been right-wing, motivated by anti-immigrant stuff. What they found was he'd started to turn around COVID, where he seemed to actually be very against Trump's handling of COVID. He seemed to be extremely angry about people who wouldn't mask up, or people who wouldn't follow lockdowns, or so it seemed. It's not totally clear, but he was suddenly changing ideologically, which is, of course, really annoying because then the trail goes cold. Now, what happened there, we're not sure. It could be he started registering for new accounts with a new email we don't know of. There's sites you can use, like 10-Minute Mail, to sign up for websites with a throwaway email that no one will ever link to you. There's a lot of stuff that you can do. Now, today, we have the New York Post, which essentially did the same thing Tucker did, but with the added caveat that they found his DeviantArt account.
Yes.
Do you know what DeviantArt is, Andrew?
Do you know what DeviantArt is out there in the audience? Send us your thoughts. Freedom at CharlieKirk.com.
Send us your best DeviantArt works.
But
if you have any.
Let me, before we get to that point, right? There is an issue here. So because on July 13th, 2024, FBI Director Chris Wray told Congress that the Bureau had found nothing in Crooks' online history, that pointed to motive or political ideology. A week later, Wray's deputy, Paul Abate, and I'm reading from Miranda's report here, Paul Abate told Congress that comments posted on one of Crooks' social media accounts appear to reflect anti-Semitic and anti-immigration themes to espouse political violence. But here's the problem, that this left out a huge chunk of the timeline, right? Where it seems to indicate a pivot from what you would consider, I guess, more right-leaning ideology, I guess, because of the immigration stuff, to anti-Trump rhetoric, anti-government rhetoric. So it was an omission. It left an entire section out from January to August 2020 when he did an ideological backflip and went from rabidly pro-Trump to rabidly anti-Trump, and then he went dark, seemingly never to post again.
Yeah,
now, that's a huge, huge question.
Yeah. And now, like in August 2020, one of his last things that we had was, in my opinion, the only way to fight the gov is with terrorism-style attacks. Sneak a bomb into an essential building and set it off before anyone sees you. Track down any important people, politicians, military leaders, etc., and try to assassinate them. He said that, and it seems, the truth is, a lot of people who become violent assassins or terrorists often are all over the map. And that's why it's so frustrating it goes cold in 2020, because 16 to 20, if you're already an unstable guy, is going to be an absolute rocket ship of potential ideological changes. I know there was a guy I knew in high school, not even an extremist. I shouldn't say he was not a violent guy, but I knew a guy who, when he was a sophomore in high school, he was an Ayn Rand fan, objectivist. And then by the time he was a freshman in college, he was a full, Lenin did nothing wrong communist.
Wow.
And then for a while, his ideology was whatever gets us to space fastest. And last time I checked, he was a MAGA supporter. So some people just whip all over the place when they're young adults. And obviously this guy was very unstable.
To your point, so on July 20th, 2019, he said Trump is the literal definition of patriotism.
Yes.
So that's 2019. And then, but by early 2020, he had flipped 180, became very critical of Trump, Fox News, and Republican complaints about mail-in voting. So he said, keep in mind, the only reason we know about any of this was a comment in January 23rd, 2020. So this is from, what did I say, July 20th, 2019, to January 23rd, 2020. So that's basically 6 months. And he starts going after President Trump, calling him Trump's stupidity.
Exactly.
So
but
that's
then,
a 6-month window.
Yeah.
And he seems to flip.
People swerve. I mean, it was COVID, of course. That drove people nuts. But then, so the thing we specifically have.
And then he described Trump as racist.
Yeah, well.
No, I know, but that's interesting. He went from anti-immigrant screeds about killing immigrants to describing Trump as racist.
But anyway, what we have from the New York Post this morning, in addition to that, which they kind of reaffirmed what was on Tucker's segment, is they found the DeviantArt account, and they say, and I'm very frustrated with this, because they say he appears to have been interested in, quote, furries and exploring gender identity. First, apparently he used the pronouns they, them as his default on DeviantArt. And also, they say it had an obsession with scantily clad cartoon characters that had muscle-bound male bodies and female heads. And so
apparently that's like a subgenre.
There's a lot of subgenres of it. And I'm annoyed because, okay, they say that, and you'd want to know how much of there is that, because if they look at one, that's different from if they look at 100 or 1,000 or 10,000. And, it might be sort of disturbing, so you'd want to maybe censor parts of it for normal people. But I suspect a lot of people are going to want to know what the heck are we talking about here? Because as we'll get into in the next segment, if he was really deep down that rabbit hole, he's going down a rabbit hole a lot of other people who eventually become violent in the last couple of years have gone down.
Well, and that's exactly it. The trans or gender confused community may be the most terrorism prone community in the country. It's totally possible. I don't have the exact stats, but man, there's a lot of anecdotal evidence.